Hi, my name is David, and I'm 67 years old. I'll never forget that Christmas night when my billionaire son looked straight into my eyes, in front of his glittering guests, and asked one question that froze me to the core. Dad, did you get your $8,000? Everyone laughed politely, but my hands trembled as I clutched the glass of water. They didn't know the truth. That single question wasn't about money. It was about a secret my family had buried for years, a secret that was about to change everything. Before I tell you how my son's Christmas question turned into the biggest fight of my life, I want to hear from you. If your own child mocked you in public over money, how would you respond? Let me know in the comments, and also tell me which city and country you're watching from so I can thank you personally. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more true stories like this. The truth is, while my son lived among gold, I counted coins. I returned that night to a small apartment on the edge of town, where the heater clanked more than it warmed, and the wind slipped in through cracks in the windows. The borrowed suit still smelled faintly of another man's cologne, and when I hung it on the back of my chair, I stared at the patched elbows of my own jacket. For dinner, I warmed a tin of soup, chicken noodle, the kind you buy in bulk when you're alone and trying to stretch every dollar. The sound of the spoon against the pot echoed in my empty kitchen. No laughter, no carolers, no family, just the whistling wind. My car, an old Ford that rattled louder than the church bells on Sunday, sat in the parking lot with a cracked windshield. I couldn't afford to replace. Every month I prayed it would start, because the mechanic already told me, one of these mornings, she won't wake up. That was my reality. My son's reality? A driveway lined with luxury cars, polished so bright they reflected the mansion lights like mirrors. His house was decorated with a tree so tall it brushed the ceiling beams, every branch dripping with glass ornaments that sparkled like diamonds. Guests in gowns and tuxedos sipped champagne served on silver trays. I watched them from the corner of the room, invisible in plain sight. Nobody asked how I was. Nobody noticed that my shoes were scuffed or that I hadn't had a proper haircut in months. All they saw was the old man who somehow didn't fit. And yet, there he was, my son, the boy I once held with calloused hands after long shifts, the child I once carried to bed when he fell asleep at the table. Now a billionaire, standing tall, adored by the crowd, while I stood in the shadows. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was the distance. Every Christmas I remembered when things were different, when we had nothing, but we had each other, when I would cut paper stars for the window and he'd laugh, telling me they looked like snowflakes, when we would eat roasted chicken, cheap but ours, and he'd fall asleep on the couch, his head on my shoulder, but those memories felt like another life. Now, as I sat in my freezing apartment after the party, spooning soup that barely warmed, his question echoed in my mind like a haunting. Dad, did you get your $8,000? I hadn't, and admitting that meant exposing everything. The night of the Christmas party had begun like a dream, but not mine. I stepped out of the taxi onto a driveway paved with stone, so smooth it looked like polished marble. The cold air bit my cheeks, but the sight before me almost stole my breath. A line of luxury cars glittered in the glow of fairy lights, each one newer than the last. Bentleys, Ferraris, even a Rolls-Royce. My rusting Ford would have looked like an insult parked here. As I walked toward the mansion, the sound of music spilled out through the enormous doors, live violins, weaving Christmas carols into something elegant and haunting. A doorman in a tailored coat took my jacket as though it was something valuable, though I felt the weight of embarrassment as his eyes lingered on its worn cuffs. Inside, the house was a palace. A Christmas tree soared upward, brushing the ceiling beams, its branches jeweled with ornaments that sparkled like diamonds. Silver trays floated past me, carried by servers in black uniforms, offering champagne flutes that caught the light. Guests in designer gowns and crisp tuxedos laughed freely, their polished shoes gliding across marble floors. The air smelled of roasted turkey, glazed ham and spiced cider. Somewhere deeper in the house, I heard the faint laughter of children, their squeals mixing with the music of the pianist who played as if he'd been hired straight from a concert hall. And then there was my son. He stood near the grand fireplace, tall, confident, his arm draped casually around his wife's shoulder. His watch gleamed under the chandelier, his tailored suit perfect. He was every bit the billionaire the world admired. People gravitated to him, drawn by his charm and easy smile. He laughed with them, toasted them, spoke words that carried power, and then he saw me. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw his smile falter, his eyes soften, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He raised his glass higher, signaling the room to quiet. My stomach tightened. Something was coming. "Ladies and gentlemen," my son said, his voice carrying easily across the room, "Christmas is about family, about giving, about gratitude." Guests murmured in agreement, lifting their glasses. His wife beamed, nodding. I forced myself to stand taller, to ignore the tightening in my chest. "And tonight," he continued, turning his gaze toward me, "I want to acknowledge someone who made me who I am. My father." Every face in the room turned to me. My cheeks burned, my fingers clenched around the glass in my hand. He's taught me everything: hard work, resilience, perseverance, and I've made sure he's never had to worry about anything. My son's smile widened, confident, rehearsed. "In fact," he paused, savoring the moment, "in fact, every single month I make sure he gets $8,000 to live comfortably. Isn't that right, Dad?" And then came the words that froze my blood cold. "Dad, did you get your $8,000? The room fell silent. Guests leaned in, curious. My throat closed up. My borrowed suit suddenly felt tighter, suffocating. I hadn't. I'd never seen a single dollar. My lips parted, but no sound came out. The weight of their eyes was crushing. Dozens of polished strangers waiting for the old man's confirmation, the proof of the billionaire son's generosity. I thought of my apartment, the broken heater, the soup waiting for me at home, and for a moment I wanted to lie, to nod, to smile, to protect him, but the truth clawed at my chest, demanding to be heard. My hands trembled. My son's smile did not falter, but his eyes, sharp and calculating, warned me. "Say it. Prove me right." I lowered my gaze. The words tangled on my tongue, and then, mercifully, someone laughed, raising their glass to break the tension. The moment passed, but the question lingered like a knife in the air. I had escaped answering, but only for the moment. The question pulled me back 20 years, to a time before the money, before the distance, before I was just a guest in my own child's life. Back then, Christmas meant something else. I remembered the winter nights when the heater rattled but never worked, when I wrapped my little boy in my own coat and told him it was our magic blanket. He believed me, and his laughter filled the room like music. We didn't have a grand tree. We had a branch I'd found in the park, decorated with paper stars we cut together. He used to point at them proudly, saying, "Look, Dad, it's snowing inside." We had no feast, only roasted chicken bought cheap the day before, but to us it was a banquet. He'd sit on my lap, his eyes shining brighter than any ornament, as I told him stories until he fell asleep against my chest. I worked 2 jobs then. Janitor by day, warehouse loader by night. My hands were always cracked, my back always sore, but when he hugged me at the door, it felt worth it. I didn't care about the exhaustion. He was my reason. Then came the arguments. As he grew older, ambition consumed him. He wanted more than what I could provide. Better clothes, a better school, the chance to fit in with the wealthy boys whose parents drove shiny cars. I tried. God knows I tried. But no matter how many shifts I worked, I could never give him the life he thought he deserved. The day he left still echoes in my mind, his suitcase by the door, his jaw set hard. "I can't live like this anymore, Dad," he said. His voice was sharp, filled with a mix of pain and contempt. "I'm not going to be stuck like you." And then he was gone. Years passed. Success came to him faster than I could comprehend. Business deals, magazine covers, awards. I watched from afar, clinging to old photos. I sent letters that were never answered, called numbers that never returned my voice. Until one day the invitations started arriving. Weddings, birthdays, Christmas parties. Not for me, not directly, but sent through polite channels. At first I didn't go. My pride wouldn't let me, but last Christmas something in me broke. I went. And now here I was, standing in his mansion, surrounded by strangers, asked to confirm a lie about $8,000 I never received. The memory of those past Christmases burned in my chest. The paper stars, the coat, the cheap roasted chicken, the laughter of a little boy who once thought I hung the moon. Where had that boy gone? That night, after the party, I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling. The question wouldn't leave me. "Dad, did you get your $8,000? I could still hear the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the polite applause that followed when I stayed silent. My son had painted me as a man well cared for, comfortable, secure. But the truth was colder than the wind that whistled through my cracked window. I thought of the nights I'd gone without heat, of the bills stacked on the kitchen table, of the way I avoided neighbors, ashamed to admit I could barely afford groceries. The silence I had chosen at the party wasn't just protecting him, it was destroying me. For 20 years I had swallowed my pain, convincing myself it was better not to stir the waters. That silence kept the peace. But at what cost? Every year the distance between us grew until I was nothing more than a figure invited for display. A ghost paraded at Christmas? No more. That night, as the cold crept into my bones, I made a promise. I would uncover the truth. Whether it hurt, whether it cost me the fragile connection I had left, I would find out what my son meant by those $8,000, and I would not be silent again. 2 days later, I received an unexpected knock at my apartment door. It was Maria. She had been with the family for years, first as a housemaid, then as a kind of personal assistant. I remembered her from the party, bustling around with trays, her eyes kind though she said little. She stepped into my small apartment and looked around with quiet sorrow. "This is where you live?" she asked softly. I nodded, embarrassed. Her eyes watered. "Mr. David, I thought you should know something. That night when your son asked about the money, I saw your face. You didn't know what he was talking about." I swallowed hard. "Because I never received it." She sighed, shaking her head. "I believe you, and I think you should know. Every month, something leaves his accounts, exactly $8,000. It's written down. I've seen the ledgers. The words hit me like thunder. Money was leaving his accounts. But if it wasn't reaching me, where was it going?" Maria hesitated before speaking again. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but sometimes the things that look generous aren't what they seem. Sometimes there are secrets even inside a family." Her eyes darted nervously toward the door, as though afraid someone might have followed her. Then she pressed a folded paper into my hand. A photocopy of part of a financial statement, clear as day, $8,000 every month, labeled support. Support for me, but I had never seen it. With Maria's words echoing in my ears, I returned to the memory of the Christmas party, replaying every detail like a film. The toast, the question, the silence, and then the look on my daughter-in-law's face. She had smiled too brightly, clapped her hands too quickly, her eyes flicking toward me with something that wasn't joy. It was fear. I remembered the way she slipped her hand around my son's arm, as though anchoring him, controlling the narrative. I thought of the guests who murmured after his toast, whispering about his generosity, about what a dutiful son he was. None of them questioned it. Why would they? The proof to them was standing in the room, me. But now the cracks began to show. The more I thought, the clearer it became. My son might not be the only one involved in this lie. Why hadn't he asked me privately long ago if I was receiving the money? Why had he chosen a grand stage, a crowd, a performance, unless he truly believed it was reaching me, and if he believed it, then someone else was stopping it? The thought chilled me. I pulled out Maria's paper again, studying the numbers. $8,000 leaving his accounts every month, consistent, recorded, but never arriving. My mind spun with questions. Who redirected it? How? And why? The secret was bigger than I had imagined. A week later, another knock came. This time at the cafe where I often sat with a cup of coffee, I stretched for hours just to feel less alone. It was Alan, my son's former accountant. He was younger than me, sharp-eyed, but with a weariness that told me he'd carried too many secrets for too long. He slid into the booth across from me, lowering his voice. "Mr. David, I don't know if you'll welcome this conversation, but I think you deserve to know the truth." I gripped my mug tighter. What truth? All those monthly payments, $8,000 like clockwork. They were always earmarked for you. Your son set it up years ago, told the board it was non-negotiable support. He was proud of it, actually, said it was the least he could do. My breath caught. Then why didn't I ever see it? Alan's eyes hardened. Because someone intercepted it. The transfers never went directly to you. They were rerouted. At first, I thought it was a clerical error, but when I traced the path... He paused, his jaw tightening. "It went into an account under your daughter-in-law's name." My chest tightened as though the air had been sucked out of the room. "She's been pocketing it," Alan whispered. "Every month, quietly, for years." My hands shook. The coffee trembled in its cup. "And here's the cruelest part," Alan continued. "Your son has no idea. He believes you've been receiving it. That's why he made that toast. He thinks he's been your provider, your rescuer. But the truth is, someone closer to him has been lying to you both." The cafe noise faded, replaced by the roar of blood in my ears. Betrayal cut deeper than poverty ever had. My son's generosity twisted into humiliation. My silence turned into evidence against me, and the woman he trusted most, using me as a pawn. I couldn't hold my silence any longer. That evening, I went to the mansion. The butler tried to turn me away, but I pushed past, my voice steady in a way it hadn't been in years. "Tell him his father is here." My son appeared minutes later, confusion flashing across his face. "Dad, what's going on?" I pulled the photocopied statement from my coat and placed it on the table between us. "I need you to look at this." He frowned, scanning the paper. "Yes, that's the support I've been sending every month." I swallowed hard. "I've never received it." His head jerked up. "What do you mean? That's impossible." "Impossible?" My voice cracked but held firm. "I live in an apartment where the heater barely works. I eat soup from a can most nights. My car could die any day. Do you really think I've been living on $8,000 a month?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. Disbelief etched across his face. "Ask her," I said quietly, tilting my head toward the door where his wife had just appeared. She froze when she saw the paper on the table. For a moment, silence thickened between us. Then she forced a laugh. "David, you must be mistaken. Surely you've just lost track." "Lost track," I cut in, my voice sharper than I intended. "Do you think I'm senile? Do you think I wouldn't notice an extra $8,000 in my account every month?" Her smile faltered. My son looked between us, his face paling. "Is this true?" he demanded. She stammered, searching for words. I only meant it was safer this way, to manage things, to..." "Safer?" My voice trembled, more with sorrow than anger. "Do you know what I've endured? The nights I went hungry, the winters I nearly froze. While you lived in palaces, I scraped by, because you stole what was meant for me." My son's hands curled into fists. He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. And in that moment, the truth finally stood bare between us. Not in a courtroom, not on a stage, but in the quiet agony of a father and son betrayed. But the truth went deeper still. Alan later provided more documents, emails, transfers, records hidden in folders labeled household expenses. The $8,000 was only part of it. There were other amounts funneled through the same account. Luxuries bought, investments hidden, a quiet empire built on lies. My son's wife had not only stolen from me, she had manipulated him too, shaping his image, controlling his generosity, turning his love into a weapon. The $8,000 had become her tool. To the world, my son looked noble, giving, dutiful. To him he believed he was. And to me it was nothing but humiliation, because silence made me appear ungrateful. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. It was about love stolen, trust broken, family fractured. When I confronted her again, she whispered through clenched teeth, "You should have stayed quiet, nobody would have known." But I had already spent 2 decades staying quiet. And it had cost me everything. Now the silence was over. The mansion that once glittered with warmth and music now felt colder than my tiny apartment. My son sat slumped in his chair, the photocopied statements scattered across the table. His hands shook as he ran them through his hair. His wife stood at the edge of the room, her eyes darting between us, her polished confidence gone, stripped bare by the truth. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I didn't come here to humiliate you, I said softly, looking at my son. I came here because you asked me that night in front of everyone if I'd received your money. And I hadn't. You deserved to know the truth. He looked up, his eyes red. Dad, I thought I was helping you. I thought all these years you were okay, that I'd taken care of you. All those speeches I gave. His voice cracked. I was proud of myself, proud that I hadn't forgotten where I came from. My throat tightened. I wanted to reach out, to tell him it wasn't his fault, but the wound was too fresh. His wife suddenly stepped forward. "You don't understand," she hissed. "I protected this family's image. Do you know what people would have said if they'd seen him living in that place? Do you know how much damage that could have done to your reputation?" My son turned on her, fury in his voice. "So you lied to both of us? You stole from my father to protect my image, to protect yourself?" She faltered, lips trembling, but no excuse came. Silence stretched. The only sound was the faint ticking of the ornate grandfather clock in the corner. And then my son looked at me, not as a billionaire, not as a man admired by strangers, but as a son seeing his father's suffering for the first time. His voice broke as he whispered, "Dad, I'm so sorry. The apology was real, but it couldn't erase the years. It couldn't erase the winters I'd spent alone, the meals I'd skipped, the pride I'd swallowed. It couldn't erase the distance that silence had built." I nodded slowly. Sorry doesn't change the past, but it can shape the future. The question is, what will you do now? That night I left the mansion with the cold air biting my face and the city lights stretching out before me. The truth was no longer hidden. The lie had been exposed, but exposure didn't heal. It only tore open the wound wider. My son had a choice to make. To rebuild, to confront the betrayal inside his own home, to decide whether family meant more than image, more than wealth, more than silence. As for me, I walked down the long driveway in my worn shoes, my breath rising in pale clouds. For the first time in decades, I felt a strange strength in my chest. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't a ghost. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. Because as the snow fell heavier, I knew the question wasn't just about $8,000. It was about something far greater: love, trust, and whether blood could truly hold a family together when money had already torn it apart. I whispered into the night, a promise to myself and to the son I still loved. We are not done. Before I continue, I want to hear from you. If your child put you on the spot in front of the whole world, exposing a secret you've carried for years, what would you do? Protect them or tell the truth? Write your answer in the comments below, and please tell me which city and country you're watching from so I can thank you personally. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next chapter of stories like this, because trust me, this one is far from over.